Hello best friends, what is happening? Today I'm going to teach you guys how to do the Olympic lifting movement of the snatch, but we're going to learn how to do it at home. I have my mop. I don't have my mop. I have my mop because I'm going to teach you guys how to do it with tools that you have at home, because I know that when you're learning a new skill, sometimes it can feel a little bit embarrassing to go straight into the gym or straight into the deep end and learn or make mistakes in front of other people. So I'm going to teach you guys all of the technical components of the snatch lift using at-home tools, so that you can go into the gym with a barbell and then feel more confident that you know what you're doing. Now, all of the steps that I'm going to break down today for the snatch are consequential, meaning that they're all prerequisites of one another. So if you can't do one of them, you're likely going to struggle with the next step. So it does pay to take a little bit longer to really refine each step as we move through. Make sure you're comfortable and confident before you progress onwards. That being said, we're going to get started. I'm just going to remove this water from this because I don't fancy having water dripped on my head. Now throughout this video, I'm going to be inputting little clips of me doing this in a barbell so that you can see it really does translate. I have a chandelier just above me, so I'm just going to step back, but really you don't need a lot of space to do any of these things. Now the first step is to make sure that we're finding out our grip length. So we want to find out how wide our hands have to be when we're doing a snatch. The first way that we can tell, and I wouldn't do this with a barbell or a tool overhead, but it's to make a right angle with your arms. You then tip that right angle up, and then you grab hold of your mop or your implement at that distance apart. So the right angle, mine went a little narrow there, but that is how wide it's going to be. So if I use my mop, so you can see that it relatively translates, right angle. And that is the width that my hands need to be on the bar. The second way of doing it, when you bend over, you can see that you get a little hip crease when you do a hip hinge movement. The other method of finding your grip is to find that hip crease so that when you're standing naturally or normally, you're going to want the bar or your mop to rest in that hip crease. That's another way of finding your grip. So once we have our grip, we can start getting into the movements. The first movement is a behind the neck press. So in this, I'm bringing my mop or my barbell onto my back. I'm then going to bring my elbows underneath the mop, and then I'm going to push straight up. This is the behind the neck press. If you're really tight in your shoulders, you might feel some pain there, so it is worth stretching and warming up properly first. Otherwise, keeping that wide grip and pushing straight up. It'll feel harder than a normal shoulder press or military press because of the wider grip. Another really important thing when we're doing that snatch grip or behind the neck press is you want to make sure your wrists are flicked back. And the reason for that is when you're pushing up, my elbows are in a straight line and my wrists are flicked back. Can you see there? When we're holding a heavy weight overhead, we can't hold as much weight straight through our wrist like that as we can when it's back. Because that wrist is the strongest point, not our fingers, not our knuckles. So you've got to make sure the weight is flowing straight through there, which is why we flick back our wrists when we push up. The next step of the snatch is learning how to do the overhead squat. So again, I'm finding my grip. I'm putting the bar or the mop on my back. I push up with my lats, my elbows, flick my wrists back, and then I'm going to squat down. You're always aiming for about 90 degrees in terms of your hip and your knee, and that's the bottom of a squat usually. Now I will say, for me as a coach, if you're not thinking about competing in weightlifting, it's less important to me the depth of the overhead squat. What is more important is the stability in that movement. So if you're squatting, but you're wobbling or you're collapsing through your chest, falling too far forward, your hands are all the way back here or they're all the way forward, that is more of a problem than how low you get. So for example, if I'm nice and strong through my core, through my back, my legs, and I only get to here, which is not 90 degrees, but it's strong, I'd rather you stay there and then build up from there. In terms of how far back the bar should be when it's over your head, you want it above your ponytail or above the back quadrant of your head is what we would say. So it rests usually directly above here. If it's dropping too far forward, that means that you've probably not got the mobility to squat down with your shoulders. And if it's not staying upright and you're squeezing up through your lats to keep it nice and straight, wrists flick back. Does that look okay? What do you think? You want to maintain it in that position the whole way through that overhead squat. Now the next step is our snatch balance. There's two types of snatch balances. There's a heaving snatch balance and then a drop snatch, as we would call it. I'm first going to teach you the drop snatch. That is where you start with the bar in that behind the neck press position or on your back. You're then going to drop your hips down and extend your arms at the same time so that you land in an overhead squat position. It'll look like this. I didn't go very low there, but that's okay. That is a drop snatch. Now the purpose of that is to work on the timing of the movement because you want to hit the bottom of that squat and arms extended at the same time. You don't want to go down and then push up, and you don't want to go up and then sink down. It has to happen simultaneously. Build up the power and control, and then you can add the range of motion. Then you can work on getting deeper. So for a drop snatch, the priority is on the timing, and then you have stability and strength in that overhead position as a secondary focus. Now a heaving snatch balance is where you would do a little preload and then push up. In that case, the focus is primarily on the strength overhead and then the stability and the timing as a secondary focus. The heaving snatch balance will look like so see how I went up a little bit first? And then I dropped down into it. When you're doing the snatch balance, you also want to have your feet in your squat position. Okay, that means the position that you would most comfortably squat in or most comfortably do an overhead squat in. That's your feet. All the way through this, I haven't mentioned it, but we're keeping that neutral spine and we're keeping our core braced and nice and tight. The next step is the power position. Now this is a really important part, so it's worth taking some time to be familiar with this. The power position is where I sit back with my weight over my heels, my hips are dipped, and my knees are bent. You might see some people leaning forward a little bit, but as long as your weight is over your heels, your knees are a little bit bent, that is okay. So this is what the power position will look like for me. My elbows are turned out, which means they're following the line of the bar. So a little dip, maybe a little bit of a lean forward. That is my power position. My feet are in my squat position when I'm in my power position, when we're practicing that movement. Feet squat, elbows turned out, knees bent, and so when I move, I'm only moving vertically. I'm not moving forward, I'm not moving back, I'm going up. The next step is to start putting some of these things together. So we're going to do a power snatch from a power position. Now a power snatch just means that you're not going below 90 degrees with your squat. So typically you can't lift as much weight in a power snatch as you could a full snatch. Some people call it a squat snatch, but it's just a snatch. This is what it will look like, the power snatch from the power position. I'll spin around for you. Power position. Big shrug. When I'm practicing my power snatch from a power position, my feet are going to be moving from a narrower or my pulling stance to my squat stance. When you pull off the ground in a deadlift, your feet are typically narrower than when you squat. So when we're snatching, your feet are going to move from your deadlift, your pulling position, into your squat position. They're going to move and become slightly wider. So they move from my pulling into my squat position. The next step is to start progressing so that we can start looking like we're doing more of a full snatch. This starts by doing a snatch grip Romanian deadlift. Snatch grip meaning nice and wide, Romanian deadlift meaning our hip hinge. I'll show you from the side. Here we go. Really important throughout this whole movement is our hip hinge, is that we want to keep our bar or our mop as close to our body as possible. This makes it more efficient to lift up and down. You want the bar so close to you that it's like it's shaving your legs. You'll see some people have really big scrapes up and down their legs when they lift, and it's because that bar is so close. You also want to keep the weight over your heels for as long as you can. I'm keeping my chest or my shoulder in front of the barbell also. So have a look from the side. I'm keeping my weight in my heels, but my shoulder is over the bar. If I'm back up here, that's more of a squat and it's not a hip hinge. So I'm keeping my shoulder over the bar, keeping the bar nice and close, and standing up. The next step is doing the Romanian deadlift into a shrug or a pull. When we do the Romanian deadlift into a shrug or a pull, we have to make sure we hit the power position first. So when I come down, Romanian deadlifts, we usually start just below the knee. So I'm down below my knee, I'm coming up, I have to hit that power position, and then I'm going to shrug and come up on my toes. This is what it will look like. So take your time, go nice and slow, hit that power position, and then extend rapidly. You want to have patience. You need to wait until you're in that power position before you initiate that shrug or the pull. The next step is to put all of those things together again. So we do a power snatch from below our knee. That will look like one more time from the side. That's a power snatch because I'm not going below 90 degrees. I'm quite upright when I'm doing this because if you know me, you know I have a history of hippie issues. The next step is to start pulling from the floor. Now this is the part where it does get a little bit tricky just because when we're at home, we don't have plates on the side of our mops, do we? So it's gonna be up to us to dictate where the floor is. So you come down nice and low. You're probably mid-shin is where the bar would rest if you had weights on it. So we're mid-shin. All of these rules still apply. Neutral spine, elbows turned out, feet in pull position, shoulders over the bar. I'm then gonna start pushing up slowly till I reach that power position, shrug, drop under. Putting that all together. So we're working on the pull, power snatch from the floor. The full power snatch from the floor. I might have rushed that one a little bit, so I might not have hit that full triple extension, which is the shrug with your knees extending, hips extending, and your ankles extending at the same time. Once we've started pulling from the floor, the next step is to work on that depth or the range of motion so that you can go into a full snatch. What that will look like is doing a power snatch, either from below your knee, from the floor, or from that power position, and then sinking into an overhead squat. Eventually we make it more fluid and it becomes one movement. So we could do that from the power position, we could do it from the transition position, which is typically just below your knee, coming up, and then go down into that overhead squat. And then when you feel comfortable, you're gonna put all of that together, you're gonna power snatch from the floor all the way up and catch it in quite a low position or a low arse to grass overhead squat. All of those movements are how you do a power snatch. I think as coaches, we can sometimes make this a little bit trickier than it needs to be. But if you can do all of those different things on a mop, go try it out at the gym. It becomes a little bit tricky when you don't have the overhead strength or the pushing strength to hold the weight up, because the smallest barbells typically are about 15 kilos. You will find some gyms that have lighter barbells that you might be able to train with, or they'll have PVC pipes, which case you'll be ready and prepared for that one because you've been practicing with your mop or with your vacuum. But all of these technical components stay the same. If you feel like you get to the gym and you're using a barbell and it starts to drop off, that means that strength is probably the limiting factor, particularly if your technique was super good earlier. You might find some people who've never done Olympic lifting before get to the gym, they struggle with a barbell and they say, oh, maybe I'll just add some weight and that'll make it better. If you are doing Olympic lifting correctly, every time you pick up this bar, no matter what weight is on it, the movement should look the same. It should look the same whether you have 15 kilo bar or 200 kilos lasher. The technique is what makes this movement. It should be consistent across all the weights that we lift. The timing should be the same. The intent should be the same. And if you're patient enough to stick with it, you will get stronger. It's an inevitability. There's no rush to put weight on the bar. It's okay to take your time until you feel comfortable and you feel like you've really mastered the movements. If this video is interesting to you, I'm happy to do a similar thing for the clean and jerk, which is our other Olympic weightlifting movements. But the snatch typically is what we would teach first because it teaches all of the key components like the Romanian deadlift, keeping your shoulder over the bar. It teaches our triple extension and our shrug. The clean and jerk, we add a whole other phase of movement with the jerk. So typically we teach that afterwards. So spend some time, master the snatch, and then let me know what you think. Let me know if this video helped you. I hope you guys enjoy. I hope you get your mops out, get your barbells out. Feel free to tag me on Instagram if you try any of these things. I would love to hear it. And if you struggle with any of these steps, spend time on it. If you're struggling with that behind the grip neck press, work on your overhead pushing strength, do shoulder press. There's ways that we can break down each of these phases to make sure we're super solid before we progress into the next one. If you have any questions, let me know down below, and I will see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody.